Hi, I'm Hunter.
I'm Sophia.
I'm Edgar.
I'm Abby.
And we're here to talk about sex education. All right, Sophia, stop laughing. You're up. What are we talking about today?
We are going to be talking about sex education in our Lee County region. So just to redefine sex education, Planned Parenthood stated that it is a high-quality teaching and learning about broad varieties of topics related to sex and sexuality, exploring values and beliefs about those topics, and getting skills that are needed to navigate relationships and manage one's own sexual health. So that can include like human development, personal skills, sexual behavior, sexual health, and this typically tends to be very inclusive. Our findings have shown that there hasn't been any inclusive sex ed programs or formal sex ed programs in our area. What kind of sex ed programs did you guys have at your high schools?
Personally, mine was kind of limited. It existed though, because I had Hope Online and that was whatever, right? But also gym teachers would teach it for a class here and there, but that's about it. There might be a presenter that comes in once in a while and says, hey, this is a condom, this is how you put it on, and that's about it. So it was limited, but it existed.
My sex education, I went to a private school, so it was very sheltered. They avoided topics such as teen pregnancy and the use of contraceptives.
At my high school, I took a whole class and we didn't really speak too much on sex education. It was more of abstinence. There was no talk about condoms or anything.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience. I had a Hope teacher have a short, brief presentation on sex ed, and it was not thorough, it was not inclusive. I actually called 6 different high schools in the Lee County area, and all of them had no formal sex education program, and only 2 of them confirmed that they had Hope or PE teachers that actually talked about sex education, but they never confirmed what information they were actually talking about. So what do you guys think of that?
That's terrible. It needs to improve. There needs to be some type of set program that's inclusive to everyone.
Yeah, I think it should be a very universal program set by each state so that every student in every school is being taught the same thing.
Yeah, rather than us just wandering around not really knowing the information that's critical for our health and our development.
It's always better to have an educated population.
I feel like the education most people have is just what we learn from media and from secondhand sources. It's not really accurate or
productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in my experience, my school did not like to talk about sex education a lot, but they never even gave us secondary resources that we could go to that were actually medically correct.
In middle school, I remember we'd watch videos on abstinence. That's pretty much the only education we got then. The resources that they do provide are very few.
I also think we should normalize the topic of sex. I think some people are ashamed to talk about it, even though it's a very normal and human thing that happens. So I think that needs to change as well.
Definitely. Now, you brought up resources. So I know that colleges typically have a little bit more resources available to students. Abby, you're part of Peers Care, right?
Yes.
So can you explain what you do in regards to sex education here on campus?
Right, so Peers Care is part of the Office of Prevention and Wellness here on campus. We offer some free items such as condoms, which would include internal, external, flavored, latex-free, and dental dams. We also provide information to students about hard topics such as sex protection, drugs, HIV/AIDS, just so that we are promoting education rather than ignorance and avoiding that
Quick question.
altogether.
What's a dental dam?
So a dental dam is essentially a condom that is cut. So it's a sheet of that material that you would use for oral sex. So it protects from if you have a cut on your lip or something, you would protect it from those fluids.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah.
Huh.
So then we also have the Student Health Services on campus, which offers free STI testing every Wednesday, oral contraceptives for $12, and Plan B emergency contraceptive for only $10, which is great for college students who don't have that kind of funding.
Yeah, because usually isn't it more expensive?
Definitely.
Yeah.
In other areas, it's more expensive. I think FGCU does a great job of having lower prices, so it's easier access for every individual.
That does seem to be a common trend among colleges too. They're more proactive in trying to educate in sex education, probably making up for the lack of it being done in earlier public education, And the fact that we're in college now, so promiscuous activity is more likely.
Right. And so I went to a private Christian college my freshman year, and nothing of this was talked about. There was a wellness clinic, but topics on like consent was ignored because I think the stigma that doesn't happen because it's a Christian or a private school, which is really interesting, and that's definitely a problem.
So why do you all think it's important to discuss and implement sex education?
Well, without it, we're just a furthering of STDs, HIVs, and other diseases is inevitable. Furthering of unwanted pregnancies or unintended pregnancies, and just impeding in people's everyday lives, you know? Because they need that education in order to have proper processes and to know what's best for them.
Awareness is key, and if we don't provide that education, then things aren't going to work out for people.
It's a bad time.
I agree.
Yeah. What's like one thing you wish you were taught when you were going through schools in Florida that you know now?
I think the topic of consent is something that needs to be brought up more. Again, like my sex education experience wasn't very in-depth at all, and I think having that conversation of, okay, how do you bring up like talking about sex with your partner and like what is consent is very important, and it needs to be taught at a younger age.
I feel like more information on like contraceptives like needs to be covered. Like I said, in high school, I didn't get any of that information. It was just more like, don't have sex or you're catching STD. Like they didn't even like talk much about like sex itself. It was more of like health. Like, oh, this is what this is a body part. You have it. Like that's it.
I also think that we weren't taught that you can contract STDs from oral sex, and so that's a huge thing. People grow up not thinking you can.
That's interesting because I was taught a little bit of this and that when I was going through school, like in middle school and high school. Like it wasn't in depth, obviously, because there's still a bit of shyness towards it. But like one of the effective strategies one of my teachers did do was like having a jar where kids can, during like sex ed class, where kids can put questions into the jar, and then so there would be no shyness around it. Because there's a lot of shyness in not wanting to talk about those issues because it's very personal. So I think being more proactive and taking approaches like that so that we can try to educate our students is essential. So,
I agree.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I'm glad we had this discussion. This is the end of our talk on our regional sex education programs.
Heck yeah. We did it, folks.
Woo!